Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. This is episode number 25 with Ashley Artrip. Just somebody who is super cool, doing really neat work, kind of at the intersections of work and education and the future of both of those things and moving towards that. So she has a really interesting story, just how she got to be working at her current gig with the SV Academy. You'll learn more about that. But she's kind of part of this group, which I've been trying to think of a cool name for, but sort of just kind of higher ed hustlers, people working at the intersections of work and education. So be sure to look at the past episodes with those other members of that group, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of them return here soon. I actually just talked with Brian, and his episode is going to post the next couple of weeks. So definitely check out all the cool stuff that we mentioned in this episode down in the show notes on the blog. Just go over to higheredgeek.com. And after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 25 with Ashley Artrip. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftKick be a sponsor of the podcast because I've seen their work firsthand, and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftKick is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus, as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftkick.hq.com, to learn more, and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. Yeah, but how are things going? I guess I forget when it was that we hung out, but it feels like it's been a while just because I had a lot of other stuff going on. But I guess no, you're like still relatively new in the job there, which I guess we'll talk more about in the actual episode. But yeah, how's everything going?
It's going really well. And yeah, I feel like it's been so long since we met up, but things are going really well. You know, like you, I'm so busy. Everything is just flying by. I'm actually moving to a new apartment. So we finally signed the lease. We're finally dealing with all this stuff now. So that process is like over with. So that's good that, I don't have to deal with that stress anymore. But anyway, about to go to San Francisco next weekend, and all of us are kind of moving very fast. So
yeah, because I think it's just increasingly becoming kind of aware to me of just like sort of just life stuff and adulting, like it's just like there's always something where it's like, oh, we got to do that this weekend. Oh, we got to go do this and that and whatever. So yeah, that's kind of been part of it. And I just had a trip to North Carolina that was sort of like half a like holiday present to my wife, and also sort of like celebrating her birthday, which is next week. So yeah, we were in like Charlotte and Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, no kidding. Asheville is like, I think I told you did I tell you how much I love Asheville?
Maybe, yeah. I think that was part of like, we had heard a lot of good things, which is why we wanted to go. But also when we were saying like, hey, we have this coming up, a lot of people were like, oh, that's going to be so great. You're going to love it.
Yeah. So. Did you go hiking, or what did you guys do when you were in Asheville?
We mostly did, like we were in, like we flew into Charlotte. We're there for a little bit of time. Most of it was in Asheville, but yeah, I mean, we tried to go to, it was sort of out of the way. We just had a friend who recommended it. Like, it was like Water Rock Knob or something, some sort of like lookout, but it was like the road to it was closed, which was kind of a bummer. But, what we mostly did was just like kind of drinking craft beer, eating our way around, and like coffee shops and donuts and other like local places. So, all of that was good. I mean, I would totally go back, like, kind of the proper time of year, I guess, to, do some of the outdoorsy stuff. But it was a really great city.
Awesome. Well, you did everything right then if you drank craft beer and ate at good restaurants, because that's exactly what I do every time I go there. I actually haven't done any of the hikes, and I really, really want to do them, and I've heard amazing things about them, but I've only gone in the winter, so when it's super cold, so all I want to do is just stay in and drink some nice craft beer for sure.
Yeah, and there's plenty of it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And yeah, just kind of continuing to, just check out cool new places that folks recommend checking out. So it was a good time. But yeah, I kind of like threw off my whole week and routine and everything, which is like just kind of getting back. We're just like, this week has felt very long, but also it goes quickly. Weird kind of conceptions of time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate you making time for this episode, and just always neat for me, especially people that I've met in person, just to, to kind of continue that conversation for the show here. People are just doing cool stuff. So I know you've kind of have a interesting pathway through higher ed, and I'm curious to kind of hear a little bit more about that and just the things that you geek out about. But
Sure.
We will start off here as we always do. If you just want to give folks a quick introduction of who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So first off, thank you so much for having me on today, Dustin. I'm really excited to continue the conversations that we've had around higher education and the workforce, and share a little bit about what I'm doing currently. So right now I work at SV Academy. It's a San Francisco-based startup. And wow, I got here in such a it's been a very interesting journey. And it actually started off in college. One of the first things that I really noticed when I got to college is that I was very passionate about helping people not just find careers, but help them find careers that match their professional strengths and their interests. And this passion has really set the framework for my professional career and kind of what I do today. So when I was in college, I had a startup, and this startup was a platform that would connect current college students to alumni. And there was an algorithm that we were working on that would match these students up to their alumni based on professional strengths, but also professional interests. And I'm a firm believer that, people, when college students are getting advice, they don't necessarily have all the proper context. They don't have all the proper self-awareness that they need to be able to filter that career advice. So with this platform, really, what I was hoping to do with it is to provide them with a mentor who could tell them what their experience was in a career that they were interested in, but also coming from someone who thought like them, who was wired in the way that they were. Mm-hmm. So, I just thought that was an extremely important aspect of career development, and something that you just weren't taught, when you first enroll in college. And, this idea for the startup really came from what all freshmen in college do, is just ask around. And when you're first meeting people, one of the common things that you hear is, what's your major? Why are you studying that? And that was really how this idea for the startup came about, is I was asking students what they were studying. And I'm a person who's very curious about others. So I would always kind of take that conversation a step further and say, why are you studying that? And a lot of them would say, I am at the point where I am, or I'm studying this because my parents told me it was a good idea, or I heard that I can make a lot of money someday, or I know I'll always have a job after graduation. And it just, it really bothered me. And I just feel like a lot of students didn't necessarily have all the information that they needed in front of them to be making those big decisions, when you're 18, 19, and 20. So that's where the idea for the platform came about. And then, to kind of connect that to where I am right now, well, even before that, I worked at Gallup. And when I was doing research for this platform, like I said, a major component of the algorithm was to match students based on their strengths. Mm-hmm. And if you're familiar, are you familiar with the StrengthsFinder assessment?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, awesome. You're definitely a believer then. So that the StrengthsFinder assessment was actually a component of the platform. So I was doing a lot of research on the StrengthsFinder assessment, but also just kind of this problem, that I was trying to solve, is this kind of career advice gap, or just helping students make more informed decisions when they enroll in college. And Gallup has a ton of research. They're continuing to do a lot of research on this topic. So I learned more about Gallup, and I actually came across the blog of an employee at Gallup. And it's still kind of funny to think back of what actually happened. So I was reading this blog, and it said, my role at Gallup is to have 1 billion people take this StrengthsFinder assessment. And as a 19-year-old college student, I'm just like, wow, my platform involves that assessment, and I could really help him achieve that goal. He was brought on to Gallup for the specific purpose of expanding the assessment and having more people take it. Mm-hmm. And I just decided I should email him, see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? I could shoot him an email and say, hey, I have this idea, and I think we should partner together. And this person, so if you're familiar, are you familiar with Ancestry.com?
I know of it, yeah.
Yeah. So Ancestry.com was created by Paul Allen. And Paul Allen, not Microsoft Paul Allen, but Ancestry.com Paul Allen. Paul Allen was hired at Gallup to, to have more people take this assessment. And that's who I reached out to. And I didn't really find that out until after I sent that email. And I was like, oh my gosh, can't believe I just did that. But he ended up getting back to me that night and said, I want to hear more about your idea. I would love to figure out more ways that Gallup can work with you, or just, hear more about your platform. So long story short, I ended up pitching my business idea to Gallup. And instead of partnering with me, they ended up offering me a job and said, hey, these ideas fit really well with what we're trying to accomplish within higher education institutions, and really help students understand their strengths and how that really connects to their collegiate experience, but also after that. So I was at Gallup for about 2 years. I learned so much. It's such a great organization to work because you learn something new every day with research and things like that. And now I get to put all that research into practice. So if you're familiar with Gallup's higher education research, a lot of it talks about mentorship, having work experience, how those things really help set students up for success for life after college. And that's what we do at SV Academy.
Very cool. Yeah. And I think, I guess something I'm curious about, like, cause with that whole journey, you obviously are somebody, you kind of were pursuing, kind of a your own venture and starting something, and then ended up at this, kind of esteemed organization, very large and everything. I'm curious what that was sort of like, and maybe if that was a part of what led you to want to kind of jump on with something else new, of that idea of just like, you like building things, you like creating things. I guess what were those decision points of, making those pivots? Because obviously, there's a common throughway of people kind of, finding careers that speak to them and kind of align with their goals and strengths more closely. But I guess, what were those decision points? Because obviously you could have been like, no, Gallup, I don't want to be a part of your big organization. I want to do my own thing. Yeah. What were those kind of decision points? Because obviously, looking back, you gained so much from it, but it could have been wildly different. And what, I guess, was that decision point to then kind of move to another very different organization?
That's a wonderful question. I really think for me, it was kind of two things. And the first one was that I wanted to go all in on this idea, and I wanted to learn a lot more. And, I didn't think that I had all of the tools at my disposal to just completely break away from college and start my own venture and do my own thing. So it was a little bit strategic in that sense. And I kind of saw this, going to Gallup as kind of the second best option for me, because I served more as an intrapreneur. And I think it's kind of a funny term, but it makes a lot of sense. To me, what an intrapreneur is that you have the capacity and the access to the resources that a lot of startups have, but you also have the backing and the security of working for a larger firm. So to me, it didn't seem as risky at the time. And then the second component, and this is really what kind of put me over the edge, was that the idea that I could work so closely with such an incredible entrepreneur, such as Paul Allen. I am someone who learns through relationships and through mentorship, and I knew that this was just an opportunity of a lifetime. If anything, if my ideas never went anywhere, or if everything fell flat, I knew that it was a gut reaction that I would get a lot out of this relationship and learn how to, kind of apprentice under this great entrepreneur and learn kind of the ins and outs of what it means to think in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, you're working now for SV Academy, and maybe if it's anything that you're really utilizing now, or just stuff that kind of buoyed you throughout your time with Gallup and everything, obviously that was a time for you, like you said, like during your college experience, you were cultivating this idea and then kind of took it to them to, realize it a bit more with their support. But I guess like, what do you feel like from your college experience? Like, what did it give you personally and or professionally, through all that time that you felt like was like beneficial to you through, these early stages of your career?
Yeah. Gosh, a lot of things. I think I'll start off by saying that I most certainly would not be where I am today without college and higher education. And I think, what it gave me, both personally and professionally, is actually what I think a lot of, if you would ask a lot of people, what the purpose of higher education is, I think a lot of the answers sound something along the lines of, to create critical thinkers or great thinkers. And I think for me, it definitely instilled a mindset of asking great questions and thinking of things in different ways and challenging perspectives or, beliefs that I had held before coming to college. But I think, to get to that point of becoming a critical thinker or a great thinker, it was most certainly not in the way that other students reach that end goal. For me, traditional four-year higher education just didn't work for me. And I'm okay with that. I wasn't okay with that for a long time. But I think now, as someone who has seen what can come of questioning the sort of linear or not necessarily safe path, but the traditional path of going to higher education and going into the workforce, looking at it from a different lens, I think has really equipped me with a mindset that you need to question things. And I think that kind of goes back to the thinking piece. And I just think that success can be achieved in so many different ways, and that higher education most certainly is a path for a lot of people. But it wasn't necessarily a path for me explicitly, but I think higher education is definitely a path for success for a lot of people. And kind of as a result of that, really the main takeaway there is that I know that I'm a non-traditional thinker. And what I really want to do is to provide access, and I want to provide information for students who felt that discomfort that I felt, who were sitting in the classroom thinking like, I just want to start a business, or I just want to build something, who feel that pain and they can't really put their finger on it, why they feel this discomfort. That's what I want to do, and that's what higher education really provided for me. And I think that's a really incredible thing. And it's definitely not a traditional way of viewing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I guess just for kind of folks' clarity and stuff, because, that's like a big thing for you and big for what you're doing right now. So before I get to my next question, because, we hung out recently with a group of people that are kind of all working and thinking in spaces that are sort of trying to kind of build for the future of education and work and those intersections and all of that. So I'll link out obviously to everything we talk about in this episode if people want more info on like Gallup and strengths and stuff, and also, SV Academy. But the people that we were kind of talking in that group with, I think now you're kind of completing the kind of pantheon, like for my past podcast, I talked to all the people, and I'll probably talk to them again for this one. But, I talked to all the other people of the group, Kevin O'Connell, Grant Schroll, and Brian Leduc. So if people want to hear more about them and the things that they're doing, I'll link out to their old episodes. Still good stuff there, and good, links to good stuff in their show notes respectively. But kind of what you're doing now is, the higher ed landscape is, diverse and varied. And, I think there has been that movement where like everybody should go and get a 4-year degree. That's what everybody needs. And, I think we've kind of come over that crest and kind of are coming down from that, of knowing that there's a lot of flexibility in the way that higher ed can be delivered and the outcomes that we want and the skills that people want to cultivate and all that. So that's a lot of the work that you're doing right now with SV Academy. So if you want to talk a little bit more about your current work and like what you enjoy most about it, just so folks know a little bit more about
Sure.
what you do now.
So first off, I can explain a little bit about SV Academy, and then I'll get into a little bit more about my work specifically and what really excites me about it. So SV Academy kind of sits in this in-between space of higher education in the workforce. And SV Academy is a 12-week fellowship for college seniors and recent graduates who are interested in working in startups in the Bay Area. And throughout this 12-week experience, we equip students with the training, the coursework, all the information on tech tools that they'll be using in their full-time jobs. And so we provide them with that knowledge and that training, but we also provide them with mentorship. And this mentorship, this one-on-one mentorship comes from folks who work at places like Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Oracle, and they kind of provide this second layer of information, which is kind of the unwritten rules of business and some of the things that you aren't necessarily taught in a traditional higher education experience. How to successfully navigate a startup landscape and in the workforce within Silicon Valley. And I'm particularly excited about that. So they go through this 13-week program, and then we actually place them in one of our 30-plus startup portfolio companies. And these are all companies who are in Series A funding. They're all fast-growing startups. They're all with small teams, but these teams are all very structured, and they're really excited to work with SV Academy just because we really match the fellow from SV Academy up with their managerial style. And I think that's really important too. When I was thinking back about my time and helping students figure out what they want to do as their first job, one of the things that you don't really hear people talk about is, figuring out who your first manager. How do you want that relationship to look like? And at SV Academy, really take that into consideration and really try to match folks up based on personal strengths and, again, just sort of the way they go about completing their work. And then, so after the placement, we provide 12 more months of on-the-job coaching. So once students hit the ground running, they've started at their new jobs, they work with us for 12 more months, and we work with their managers directly to ensure that they are comfortable in their new roles, but not only comfortable, but they're also exceeding expectations of the employer and exceeding their own expectations, and really being set up for success.
Very cool. Yeah, and I guess then what do you enjoy most about that work that kind of maybe like led you to the organization?
Sure. So one of the things, what really stood out to me about SV Academy when I first heard about it is the mentorship aspect. As I mentioned earlier, I learned through mentors and I learned through doing and experiential learning. So I was initially just drawn to the program itself. In my role, what really excites me about what I do on a daily basis is I partner with higher education institutions, and I work with anyone from a president to a career service advisor, and I help them identify these kind of non-traditional thinkers, so I get to kind of work with them to help identify students who are kind of like me, and they kind of think non-traditionally. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to work for a startup. It's really hard work, but they're willing to do it, and they're committed to this outcome of working in the Bay Area for a startup. And I just think that's so exciting to me. I get to wake up every single day, and my thought process is, who am I going to reach out to today? How can I make the biggest impact today? So, I not only work with traditional higher education partners, but also with nonprofits, scholarship foundations to help identify these students as well. And one thing I failed to mention previously is that 70% of our students are first-generation college students. So there's just this big mission work that I feel every day. And, providing access to this information and to this opportunity is is, to me, I feel like it's legacy work, and I get to do that at a young age. And I know that's such a huge responsibility. But it's also it's a great privilege for me to be able to do that every day.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause I think it is that part of, getting sort of gainful, but also like positive, formative, developmental employment for these people, especially first generation college students. Like, that's realizing a huge outcome of higher education right now. That's what most students are looking for. And I think they're certainly also getting those things that you were speaking of, the critical thinking skills, the curiosity, how to ask good questions, and, they're developing their identity, and social networks and things like that. But yeah, I mean, that's a very immediate and important, and sort of, it's going to, I think, anchor a lot of those things that they would, they're maybe not appreciating or realizing right away. Like right after they leave college, it's like, yeah, I grew so much and all that. Like, they'll reflect back and, maybe kind of be more aware of that growth that happened. But I think they probably won't realize it, and maybe will, resent it, like a lot of students who feel like, they went to a school, they went and got into a lot of debt, and they don't have this sort of career livelihood, or sort of, they might be sort of like underemployed or something. So I think, yeah, you're kind of that bridge that, obviously these people might not like stay at this job forever, like hardly anybody does anymore anyway, but you're at least just kind of like cushioning that landing after college, which I think can be so hard for so many people. And if you're just able to be that guide, I think that is really valuable. And like you said, I mean, you're setting people up to have just a hugely positive impact for years to come. And, maybe these organizations just do amazing work with the people that get placed there, that you assist with and everything. So yeah, it's really cool. And I imagine we'll see probably more organizations doing similar work, or, just helping to kind of get the people where they need to be or where they want to be. Because I think that's part of the issue too, is just getting folks where they're needed.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, you noted kind of how you're a thinker. You're somebody who, I imagine is kind of in their head and just kind of thinking of big ideas and just, kind of doing all that sort of stuff. So, again, I think I resonate with people who kind of just, like I say, quote unquote, get it, I just kind of resonate with. So I imagine you kind of have a, sort of geeky personality, or maybe nerdy, or however you might want to think of it. But I guess, maybe in addition to the things, anything like professionally that you might want to note that you kind of geek out about, or anything personally, but sort of like what's capturing your attention right now? Is it stuff that maybe you've always been into? Maybe is it newer stuff? Anything that you would like to share?
Oh gosh, that is such a hard question, because I geek out about so many things. I think you hit the nail on the head when you were saying that I'm up in my head a lot. I think a lot. So I'll kind of share something that's been present throughout my entire life. And this is a little bit embarrassing for me to admit, but if you ask my parents, what's one characteristic about Ashley that has been present throughout her entire life? I think they would say that she has been almost obsessed with inspiration and motivational quotes. When I was a kid, I would actually get in trouble from my parents because I would use up all the ink in the printer to type out motivational quotes that I found and cut them out and tape them around my house. So not only would I use all the ink in the printer, but I would put them everywhere. So I would put them on the mirror of the bathroom. I would put them, in the doorway to go down to the basement, or put them on the kitchen cupboard or something like that. So if you can imagine, just motivational quotes everywhere. And I told myself, read it every time you walk by it to try to internalize it. I've just done that all my life, and I don't really understand why. I know it makes me really happy, and it really energizes me. But kind of how that's manifested now. So kind of going from where I used to be with using all the ink in the printer, now I just read all the time. I love self-help books. And I know, again, it's a little embarrassing for me to admit, but I absolutely love self-help books. I actually just had to buy a brand new bookcase for me to fill with all of my books that were just kind of sitting in a pile. And they're all kind of self-help related material. But I really geek out about that. And I just think it's really empowering. It's been an outlet for me as someone, again, kind of who thinks non-traditionally and has just big ideas. It was just an outlet for me to kind of, learn more about how other people think and know that I'm kind of not alone in thinking in big ways.
Yeah. And, I guess I'll say, I'm sure some people chuckle at it, but it's like, there's a lot worse things that you could be into. Like, that's fine. It's like positive, it's helpful, it's not hurting anybody. But yeah, I'll have to mention this to her, but there's somebody in my grad school cohort that has all of those sort of like inspirational posters that just have like the picture, one word, and it's like, life is what you make it, like determination. Like she has a bunch of those, and it's like, that's like one of her things. And like, it's just a simple thing. Cause I think, we have a lot of internal monologues, we have a lot of formulas, and sort of like, that's been something that I've had to work through a lot of, sort of like, your mind kind of predicts the future and, catastrophizes thing, like we have all these things that will, internalize, like you said, and just like, if you can almost kind of flip that script and just sort of like, kind of click on like more positive messaging and stuff. It's like, that is good. And that I've like, I had a whole, positive psychology course in grad school that was sort of like applied to like, sort of like college counseling and using like, strengths and sort of positive psychology and, applying that to the higher ed landscape. So, just the general idea that I think the world can make us to be, just have like negativity bias and all those sort of things. So it's good on you for trying to, kind of, intercept those biases that I think, some people aren't really aware of. But, and I think like self-help books, like I guess that's some of what I read too. Like I read a lot of those, or like a memoir of somebody, kind of notable, successful. And I know sometimes I think there's like a YouTube series or a podcast series about people who like try to live their lives like by one book and like one person's point of view, which of course like, doesn't work out. But that is, if you have sort of like a healthy diet of just like, like anything that has worked for that one person only worked for that one person. So if it's like, if you have a healthy diet of like, sort of the best practices of like really successful people or creative people or just like people that you admire, it's like, you'll find the things that work for you. And I think, it's kind of this, you're going to have this mosaic of sort of good advice that, and end up being beneficial. So, that's definitely, because I will say, no judgment to the many podcast guests that I've had, but I think it's really funny that like, there's these very smart people, like very ambitious, successful people that I've talked to. And a lot of them, like, whether it's like what they geek out about or just like the TV and stuff that they're watching, like they have all said like reality TV. And I just always find that fascinating because I guess it is that idea of like some people who operate on such a high level just need to like turn their brain off. But it's like, like I try to, I guess balance it out to be like, I try to be pretty, low key zen, like go with the flow and just try to read good books about people's stories and like, sort of their point of view on the world. So, because I just never have watched reality television. I really, I guess it's just not for me. I guess I'll watch like a dumb comedy. That's where I like turn my brain off. But nevertheless, so I think pretty clear how those things have kind of positively contributed to your life. But I guess any maybe like of those books that you're reading or shows or like podcasts or things that you're listening to, just any sort of content that's capturing your attention lately, stuff that you might want to recommend that we can.
So I am reading, as a lot of folks are reading, Principles by Ray Dalio, and I'm reading that as well. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon, so to speak. I really like this book, and if you haven't had a chance to read it or check it out, it's just an incredible, so I'm looking at it right now. You can open any page of this book and you will read something that is just so incredibly insightful, but it's written in a way that's a lot different from a lot of the self-help books that I've kind of read in the past. It's just written in such plain English. It's just sentence after sentence. It's just really strong, powerful, insights of ways to think, of ways to have clearer thinking patterns or how to make better decisions. It's really interesting. So I won't talk too much on that, but there is something I definitely want to recommend. And it's not necessarily a piece of content in particular. It's an app actually, that really fuels my self-help, addiction, so to speak. There's an app called Blinkist. I don't know, Dustin, have you ever heard of Blinkist before?
I'm not aware of this. No.
So it's spelled Blinkist. And what it is, it's an app on your phone, and it's short snippets of nonfiction books. So if there are, this book that you've been trying to find time to read, but you just don't have time for it, it will summarize it for you. And it's like Cliff Notes, basically, audio Cliff Notes, in points and chunks. And I listen to it when I get ready in the morning. Because I don't necessarily have time to read 7 different books at once as much as I want to. And it just provides really awesome little tidbits to start your day. And you're just like, wow, like Habits of Effective Speakers. I just made that title up. But you can just read that before you start your day. If you have a big presentation or a speech coming up, you can just kind of take little bite-sized chunks, and it's kind of like a TED Talk too. So if you don't necessarily want to purchase it, I would definitely suggest the TED Talks, which everybody knows about. But yeah, if you're looking for specific titles of books and you don't have time to read them, definitely check out Blinkist.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. And then, we will end on a positive note, as we always do. Just anything or things that you are looking forward to in your job and life, the world, just to end things on a optimistic note.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a selfish positive note, but I'm really just excited to one day put all of the things that I've picked up and learned from folks like Paul Allen, when I was working with him and learning from him, and my current CEO, Raheem Fazal. I can't wait to just put all of this information that I've learned and I've stored in Google Docs and notes over the years, and all these like little nuggets that I've gotten from all the books that I've read, to put it into practice and to kind of put it into play. I don't know what that's going to look like, whether that becomes a company or a book of my own, or maybe even a podcast or something like that. I'm just really excited to see how that manifests itself, because really what I want to do is just give all this information back that I've picked up. And again, kind of going back to the point of what I want to do is make the path for non-traditional thinkers easier and more accessible. I kind of see this as a way of doing it. So this is kind of more of a bigger life goal of what I'm excited about, but I'm, nevertheless more just really excited about it for sure.
Yeah, it's good. Generous of you to not want to kind of hog all of that goodness for yourself, and either use it to, like, if you're running something, and you are like, oh, what would this person think about, this problem? You always have these like little morsels and advice and wisdom from good folks that you've interacted with, and you could sort of, purify it down into, a book or a podcast or anything like that. But also just like, just having something to go back to when, you might have a difficult dilemma on your hands. But it's just a good mindset to have, of just learning from the good folks that you work with, and even the people that you maybe you serve, like these students that you're impacting. I'm sure they will tell you amazing stories of the impact that you've had, and kind of always having that be a good grounding for you. I really appreciate all that you've shared about your journey and the cool things that you're doing now. So again, everything that we mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes, so definitely go check that out. Just really appreciate your time, Ashley. And I'm sure we'll see you soon or talk soon. Just have a good rest of your night.
All right. Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate it.
This podcast is a proud member of the ConnectEDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.